Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Monday edition of our Generative AI news briefing from GAI Insights. I am David DeLallo, and I will be moderating the session for today. We have 6 articles that we'll go through, some really good reporting, actually, in a couple of the articles. They're a little lengthy, but very good job done by a few journalists. We'll look at some misbehaving by a chatbot, which is becoming something we talk about at least once a week, I think. This will be in the New York City chatbot. Apparently, Congress has banned Copilot. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how stability has kind of run itself into the ground, it appears, and some exciting future developments from the OpenAI and Microsoft partnership. And I'm just realizing Ankaj is not with us today, which I had not been aware of. I don't know if anybody has this pulled up, but if not, I will pull up a screen so that we can share the first article for you, which will be about Congress not allowing us to use Copilot. Give me 1 second here, and I will get that up for us right now. Okie doke. First one, thoughts. Microsoft says no bueno for Copilot being used in the by Congress out of safety concerns. I think we have Paul on this one.
You said Microsoft. I think it's Congress is banning it, correct?
Yes, Congress is banning Microsoft.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is optional. It's early market. Someone being extra cautious, and hopefully at some point our congressional staffers understand the huge productivity importance of this and get a solution they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, well, apparently Microsoft is aware of this, and they're supposed to be rolling out an even more secure tool down the line, which is interesting because you would hope that they're working on that level of security for everybody, right? And it's kind of interesting that they've rolled out the tool knowing maybe that it's not the most secure to everybody, but they're going to give Congress a better version.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bigger issue on both the state and local level as you see these huge productivity gains for Bureau of Registry of Motor Vehicles and everything else. A little bit like when the toll booths became automated. Instead of putting the quarters in, you could drive through a fast lane. There was 10 to 15 years of angst on the public market or public union side before technology get rolled out. And but anyway, the optional for our AI leaders.
Yeah, I was debating whether we should put an important on this one. I'm okay with optional, but for our leaders, I hear that a number of companies actually did the same for the scare of data loss. And so they essentially banned ChatGPT from being used internally. And yeah, all computers were cleaned out of it. You could not really use it internally. So yeah, it's the battle is out there, and it's going on. So I think it would be of interest to a number of leaders of what's happening with the government.
Yeah, the challenge of the shadow IT, Luda, as we talked before, is it's happening. I mean, we gave talks at 2 major banks in New York City that had absolute lockdown, fire on spot bans and ChatGPT, and we had multiple employees walking to us in the office after the meeting saying how they bring their laptops in and there's computers and they email it themselves. So I think companies have a real all organizations have a real challenge in managing this because the productivity gains are so high and you can't truly lock down usage.
Correct. So this is a war going on, really. And so Congress is doing their own thing. They are really saying they can ban it, really. They just need a different version. They need to put the guardrails. They need to work on it. So they recognize the productivity improvements. They just don't know how to deal with it. And I think that's why I'm saying we might want to reflect that in putting an important on it, and say that it will sort itself out. It will. It just will take a little bit of time.
Adam, do you want to break our split here?
No, I was right on the fence as well. I mean, I think for any accounts that have the same sort of security requirements and compliance requirements that government do, which really is above and beyond. I was looking into some of the things that are coming out, and they talk about air-gapped classified clouds for select national security customers. So this really is above and beyond just being aware of the security implications of using Teams and M365 with Copilot. So I'm leaning towards the optional side still, but I also understand why it's important to make people aware of some of these capabilities that are coming. But it's talking about key AI services like Teams Premium with intelligent recap in M365 government. So there are specific versions of M365 that Microsoft is making for government already. And it's really talking about implementing Copilot within those in a special way to address these specific needs.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure for our general customer base whether or not this would be important news.
And Adam, I didn't spend that much time analyzing this, but I want our congressional staffers using ChatGPT B2C for public information. Here's the congressional public information transcript. Summarize this. So I think this is a more better held with employee use policy and not tool banning.
Yeah, but Paul, what we're talking about here is we're talking about the Copilot that's embedded within your M365. We're talking about the Copilot that has the transcripts of your internal meetings, right? It's a different thing than giving them access. Like, it's sort of addressing a very different issue. And I think you're right. We need to have at a policy level, what is AI acceptable use and when can you use something like ChatGPT? But this specifically around Copilot within M365 and those capabilities is a slightly different conversation.
So actually, let me go back to Ludus then and bring up the important, because I think the CTO concern that was expressed to me last week, where he's got at least 150 of his vendors adding large language model capability to his enterprise apps are already installed, that he's not at all comfortable that they're doing good red teaming on it. He's not at all comfortable this is a good safety thing. And at that sense, it is generalized, Luda. I think your point.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So in essence, Paul, what exactly? It's the CTO, CIO, the discernment of where the data leak potential is there, right? So finding all those places where that leak can happen. In this case, a couple of cases were mentioned when they were concerned about the future training of the bot on the internal government information, like the one that Adam mentioned, right? They want to prevent that from happening, right? That's where the major data leak can happen. Similarly to the industry, they need to safeguard those pools of data that are sensitive, they're proprietary, confidential. So I think it's important.
Let's call it important.
Yes, we were going to move it to important because we talked about it for 7 minutes anyway, and I was like, if we talk about it for that long, then it's got to be important. So we will go with that, and we will move on to our next story, which New York City has been very aggressive with their artificial intelligence program, which is a good thing, except that their chatbot that is supposed to answer housing questions and questions if you're renting out your apartment and such is apparently spitting out wrong answers. And they've got a chart in this article showing that. And Luda, I like when you shake your finger at people, so I had given this one to you.
Thank you. But I think it's very optional. They shouldn't have expected the generalized chatbot to respond to these questions. It's in an accurate manner. They should have given it specific information for housing laws in New York City. And it's lacking that. So that's why it's giving a generic answer that one can say, well, it's inaccurate, all right, and it's misleading, all right, but it is not. And it's not completely wrong, so it's all of that gray area. And I think if they started using it for that purpose, that's wrong of them. They should have known better and tested it ahead of time. So I rate it as optional.
Yeah, anybody else on this one?
It's not the first nor the second time where we've seen examples of people bringing these chatbots out to the customer-facing side too quickly. So I agree. By now, hopefully, the message is out there, and this is just another example of it.
Yeah, and I'm I'm getting tired of when we find these and the response from whoever's deploying the tool is, it's a pilot. Well, you know what? You're saying people that you're delivering this to, they don't even know what that means for the most part. And like, you're putting way too much on them to have to determine, oh, let me look up the sources that come along with this. And then half the time it's not giving links anyway. So shame on New York City. And but we'll go optional. It's yet another reminder to, take care when you're choosing your use cases for these right now, right? Okay, so we will move on to OpenAI. They have, done what we've seen them do with Sora, which is, hey, we've got this cool voice recognition tool that'll let you clone your voice, but you're not using it yet. Apparently, they've only given it to 10 developers to test it out. But I was interested to see that HeyGen is actually using this in the background. I didn't realize that that's who they were tapping for their voice capabilities. Adam, what did you think about this?
Yeah, interesting but optional. Partly because it's news that we can't use. Partly because it's something that's already out there through other alternatives, like 11 Labs certainly has this capability. HeyGen has this capability. And also, it sounds like they actually have had this in development or available internally since 2022. It says in the article when they first built it. So in some ways, they're announcing what I see as another piece of a puzzle, right? And they're sort of building all of these capabilities, and hopefully great things are coming. But this is just it, in spite of it being OpenAI, it's another vendor announcing a capability that's already in market. So I consider it optional.
Yeah, and that, like as you said, you can't use it yet, although they're using it because they noted that this is the technology that's behind
what drives under the app. Yeah, for the conversational voice in there.
Well, Adam, so yeah, it's optional, but I want to give an atta person. Kudos to the marketing person that keep regurgitating yesterday's news, so it sounds new. I think we've seen that with a few other vendors as well.
Yeah, it's interesting the impact of this on marketing folks. I can envision it being in that department many times where you've got leaders pushing you to make this announcement, even though there's not really much to it because it's not actually available, but they want to
it even mentions this article though, like in Australia, if we want to make transfers from the bank over a certain dollar amount, it uses our voice to identify us. And even in this article, it talks about security, and part of why they claim they're not releasing it yet is because industry needs to start thinking about other mechanisms that they're going to use for authentication, because voice is not going to be a secure method for much longer.
And Adam, I used Fidelity, and 4 or 5 years ago, they rolled out their voice biometrics as a big advanced feature, and I've gone back and told them to take that off for me.
Yeah. All right. We'll go with optional, but certainly will be interesting to watch how they determine when and whether they roll out this tool, right? All right. So we will move on to this next article, which is a very, very detailed article, which is actually originally from Forbes, but we've got the kind of the Reddit scraped version here. Just in case folks don't have a Forbes subscription, we're not the ones that have done this. Somebody else has done this, put it up there. But very, very detailed reporting. I mean, excellent job. They're the ones that had actually broken the story a few months ago with about stability struggles, and now have kind of followed up with this piece. And I found it a really interesting read. It's certainly lengthy, but it's instructive. Sometimes this is what happens when you have an engineering person run a company, and the guy admittedly said, I'm not a business person. You should have somebody else helping me. And, they probably should have listened to him and installed that a while back. But Paul, what do you think about this?
It is optional, but this is just, it's gossipy, but just sad. I mean, it shows important that management counts. They spent $99 million in hosting and $11 million in revenue. This is why when the OpenAI debacle had last fall, it scared the living crap out of enterprise. And so shame on these investors. And, I think for AI leader, it's like everything else. You need to make sure you've got some responsible kids in the room, responsible adults, because they had a hell of a lead there for a while, Adam, and they have screwed it up. And he's gone. Their top engineers are gone. This is just going to be like Inflection and AI, which was hot for a moment. Now just a dead little boat spinning in the harbor.
Yeah, it's a sad story, but it's unfortunately not uncommon. And in defense of investors, sometimes, and the lead investor actually was calling for the resignation of the CEO for a while, recognizing that there's a mismatch, right? But if they're the lonely voice on the board, you can't do much about it as an investor. That's it. You need to get other investors to join forces. And if the other investors are gung-ho, you can't do much. And it's very frustrating because you see the startup burning in front of you, right? And so, but it's not completely their fault per se. But yeah, if they organized a little better, Stability would have had some money left.
Well, let me say it differently. Instead of shame on any individual investors, shame on the board.
Shame on the board.
Shame on the board. It's horrific. Shame on all of them. They should be publicly shamed because this could have been prevented.
They should have been aligned, yeah. So, but I suspect that there were some investors who just were gung-ho. They're saying he will sort it out. He is smart enough. Let's give him some time. And the time is burning money. So this is where I usually come in and say, guys, you need to be careful here. We can't raise more money until we deliver.
Yeah, I want to make a short argument for important on this one, and I'll tell you why. I think just the amount of detail of what is going on there, and the fact that we know this is probably going on in other companies, right? I just feel like it's a good story for an AI leader to read, to like come to terms with, like, this is not going to be the only player that we see this happen to, right? We have some hunches and some indications that some other players who were kind of in the mix as potentially ones that would really emerge as being, very strong are probably going to go this way. To me, I kind of see words of caution through here. I see, things for the leader to think about, to understand when they're making choices on who their suppliers will be, the types of questions that they can ask to make sure that they're getting into a company that's stable, no pun intended. So I would make an argument for important, but I don't, Adam, what do you think?
Important to me says to make the time on the weekend and add this to your reading list, and I just can't in good conscience recommend it. I mean, it's good to understand what happened here, but this is a lengthy article that really just highlights a few key sort of points about what should have been done differently. So I was rating it as optional, and I probably still sit there.
Yeah, David, I will be in the optional camp just because it's a little gossipy, and I really do not like that.
Our investor puts it in optional, I suppose we'll go with it. But I'd be curious to put this into ChatGPT and say, what are the lessons for me as an AI leader from this article, and what questions should I ask of my vendor as a result of it? That would be an interesting quick experiment that someone could do, and maybe I will. All right, so we'll go with optional, and we will go on to this next article. So there was another good piece of reporting. It was originally in the Information this weekend, which is a pay news service. Here's like a form of that article, of a shorter version on payments, about OpenAI and Microsoft's plan to build this gigantic data center filled with AI chips that'll be like nothing that exists today. Ground is not broken on this yet. It's planned a couple years out. This is just the early days of discussion that the reporter has kind of got in on. What do we think about this? I think this one is Luda.
Yeah. Optional in my book. This is announcement ahead of time. There's a lot of thinking about this, which is good. But whether it would happen or not, or they will change their mind. So I think it's super optional. But worth noting, at the bottom of the article, there's a lot of discussion about the banks, how the landscape is changing, what is happening in the digital world with the Gen AI, and that's, I think, is valuable if the reader is in that industry. So it's an interesting addition, but that's not for that. It's not about these news per se. News per se is optional.
Paul, Adam, anything to add, or do you feel optional is the way to go on this one?
Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I agree. It's optional. It's pretty far out there and shouldn't come as much of a surprise that Microsoft wants to build massive data centers for AI. What I do think is interesting and indirectly related, I dug up some news from an announcement between Microsoft and a company called Helion, where Microsoft signed a contract for the first fusion reactor from Helion, commercial fusion, that's coming online in 2028 conveniently. It's only touted to be 50, I think it's 50 megawatt. So it won't nearly address the kind of needs they'd have for something like this, but definitely something to keep an eye on is fusion, which up till now has been the holy grail and unachievable at a commercial scale, really coming to play as we converge on these massive power demands in the years to come here.
Yeah.
I would note that optional as well, but I put a post this weekend. I mean, Microsoft is just making move after move after move. It is so impressive in the last 90 days. They are masterclass outplaying Google Cloud and AWS, and it's breathtaking. And if you look at the inflection, taking the CEO and the 70 people over there, investing in Mistral, thinking ahead and getting ahead where these massive data centers are, the rollout of Copilot is really an impressive set of activities. The other thing I want to note is I continue to be impressed. I don't know Jessica Lesson, who founded the Information, but David, they continue to have really good breaking stories that I see come out in the Information, 1 to 2 days ahead of others. So they're obviously quite tapped in the Valley.
Yeah, I have a subscription. I've been enjoying it. Their newsletters are really good as well. All right, but we will go optional on this one. We've known that they're kind of working on this from several other news stories, but the piece in the Information itself, if anyone has time, is worth reading. Okay, we are on our last story for today. Google has improved weather forecasting potentially again, which they've already been kind of in that space and helping to make some headway there. This is with a generative model though called Seeds. Adam, what did you think about this?
I'd give it an interesting but optional. Yeah, scroll down a little more, David. Yes, pause right there. So it gives you an idea of what it's doing. You'll see it in a standard model. It's basically an order of magnitude more forecasting, which gives them more clarity and resolution around the probability of certain outcomes from a weather forecasting perspective. It's pretty cool, interesting stuff. As they say, it's one of the first applications of forecasting using probabilistic diffusion models. And I expect we'll see more of that, but this particular news I would consider optional.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was in this article or I just happened to see it this weekend. I saw it, and a chart showing how much, it's not in this article, but I just happened to see this week in a chart of how weather forecasts have improved over the last, I think it was since like 1970. Can't remember where I saw this chart. And, the 3-day forecast obviously has improved the least because it was best to begin with. But the advances in the 7 and 10-day forecasts, when you look at it over time, have been pretty amazing. We all complain about this, but they've come a long way. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, David, what has not improved is the local news in Boston overhyping any snowstorm coming. Oh my God, 10 inches of snow, run to the store, stop all that, and then we get a half inch. But,
It does happen a lot. Yeah. But in their defense, this is hugely computational, takes a lot of time. So I'm applauding for Google to putting the effort in working on that. I think it will improve dramatically in terms of the amount of computing power required. This is what, 5-fold or something? And down. So this is good progress in that direction. So Paul, hopefully, keep your fingers crossed, we'll get a good Boston forecast.
I hope for that a little bit. I think the clickbait advertising is such an power incentive. We may still not.
Yeah. All right, super interesting. I mean, look, we know that Google has the research chops and the scientific know-how, right? It's just their productization and the way they run their business for the enterprise that seems to always be lacking. So we'll see if they ever completely fix that. They've got some really interesting things going on there as usual.
Dave, before we leave, Jeff Tratner online notes that tomorrow.io, who's one of our speakers last year at the conference, has a fabulous nuance to this as well. And I think they're head-to-head with Google, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Totally. So I think that we had 6 articles today, and we came just with one important, which was the congressional ban of the use of Microsoft Copilot. Everything else that we've talked about, although there's a lot of interesting things here. And if anyone's on holiday today, maybe you just want to kick back and read the story about Stability's downfall and the information's scoop on OpenAI and Microsoft's venture into trying to get enough compute to do what they want to do. But otherwise, all optional outside of our congressional ban. Paul, I know we have our learning lab tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Who do we have for tonight?
We have a very exciting guest tonight for a showcase. Yanti Mishra is the Center of Excellence lead at a private equity firm called Long Arc Capital. They're a mid-sized firm. John Skavilka and I were down there in New York a couple of weeks ago at the Harvard Club, and they had brought all their CEOs in and all the investment, and they're doing a ton of stuff in Gen AI. And Yanti is in charge of getting best practices and actually using Gen AI deployed at these companies for lead gen. And they're doing a lot of exciting things, very practical, extremely real, very sharp edges with the Excel, show me the ROI with the PE type thinking here. And he's going to share some of the things you're learning tonight at our learning lab, which is 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 Eastern. And everyone's welcome. You sign up with Meetup. If you go to meetup.com and search for Gen AI Learning Lab, you'll see the sign up form.
All right, very cool. And speaking of signing up, if you want to get the output from this news show, you can sign up for our newsletter. You'll see it in the invite for this session. And thank you guys, and we will see you tomorrow.